It's likely to be a tense afternoon for the residents of Birmingham as they wait to find out the results of a vote on a devastating package of measures in an attempt by the local authority to balance the books. It'll very likely include huge council tax hikes and a number of key services slashed after the council effectively declared bankruptcy just last year. Joining us live is Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent of The Times, and the former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Roley. Thank you both for joining me. Why don't we start with you, Aubrey? I mean, this is going to be exceptionally difficult, isn't it, for the residents of Birmingham?
It certainly is. I mean, not long ago, they were being told they were on the brink of a golden decade because they hosted the Commonwealth Games very recently, and there was the much heralded arrival of HS2. Now, I think most of the residents of Birmingham will be gutted, to say the least, at the extent of the financial mismanagement and lack of funding from central government. That means that they are now facing a council tax rise of up to 21% over the next 2 years, coming at a time when inflation is biting on people's personal finances as well as local and central governments. And with inflation still stubbornly at 4%, this is a very tricky issue for Europe's largest local authority.
And are there reasons why? I mean, when I say are there, I know the answer is yes. There are reasons why, I should say, that why Birmingham is in this parlous state. And part of it is entirely the responsibility of Birmingham Council itself.
Yes, they've basically had to make payouts of more than £1 billion to settle equal pay claims. And they are not the only ones in this position, although they are probably the most high profile. Nottingham City Council has also this week been forced to sort of come up with an emergency plan to balance its books. And you have the local government authority, the local government association, which represents local authorities across the country, saying that council spending power has diminished by around 20% in real terms compared to 2010. So this is something that Birmingham is experiencing particularly sharply, but there are lots of other councils in similar situations and fears that there will be more to follow as well.
Charlie, really, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Describe what it's likely to be like being a resident of Birmingham. I mean, the quality of life is scheduled to deteriorate pretty sharpish pretty quickly, isn't it?
Yes, well, good afternoon. I mean, I think it's a dark day if you're a resident of Birmingham, because you're going to see an increase potentially in your council tax, as Aubrey was just saying, by 21%. You're going to see your street lights turned down, so it makes it less safe at night, particularly if you're walking home. If you're a woman or a young girl walking home, safety should be paramount when it comes to public services. Your street lights will go down. You will see your bin collections reduced from once a week to probably twice a week. And you are already seeing changes in people's working patterns and shift patterns. So if you're a refuse collector, so if you're collecting the bins of the morning, when you were working earlier in the morning from about 6 a.m., you're now working a little bit later from 8 a.m. That's traffic that is building up with people that are doing the school runs. So that's creating more traffic, more havoc for people going to and from school, or parents taking their kids to and from school, along with all those other services. So you are going to see a tightening of the belt, but a tightening of services, and just a tighter way of living in Birmingham, which isn't going to be good for residents. But the question has to be, how on earth did Birmingham allow itself to get into this situation in the first place without raising this earlier? It's had a £700 million bill effectively to deal with that court case that Aubrey was just saying when it comes to equality in the workplace. And it has meant that central government has had to put pressure on Birmingham. Commissioners have gone in. It is not a good example of how a local authority should be run to deliver for local residents.
And Aubrey, we're very familiar with Croydon in South London, which hit the financial scuppers some years ago and never does seem to make any recovery. And we do know that life for the residents of Croydon is a straitened affair. There are things that are just not on offer. There are facilities that other boroughs and residents enjoy that they no longer have. It's a tough life there. It's much harder than it used to be.
It absolutely is, and that's for a combination of reasons, partly inflation, partly the rise to the national living or minimum wage, and also energy costs have obviously hit councils very hard as well. this is, like I said, not something that one or two councils are experiencing. So far, 19 local authorities have approached central government for financial assistance. So it's not an issue that's going to go away. And I suspect that there are other kind of lights flashing on the dashboard all over the country where councils are sort of putting their hands up and saying the level of funding that we're receiving from central government is not enough. It's effectively, since 2010, the amount of money they've been getting has been reduced. The government has sought to be a bit more targeted in some of its funding. So under Boris Johnson, they introduced things like the Towns Fund and the Levelling Up grants. So those are sort of designed to target specific high streets or areas. But ultimately, I think there'll be people wondering whether or not those just end up being sticking plasters on a much bigger problem that stretches much further back than 2019 and Boris Johnson's election.
And Charlie, really, I mean, are we likely to see Jeremy Hunt galloping to the rescue of these beleaguered councils tomorrow in the budget? Because obviously he can't ignore this. He can't simply allow certain residents of certain boroughs in this country to lead a much more punishing life than others and just sit there and permit it. He's going to have to do something to help, isn't he? Or something more, I should say, to help.
Well, as part of the narrative tomorrow, what I think that he should say, whether he does or not is another matter, is to point out that, you know, if you take the case of Slough, as you mentioned, if you take the case of Liverpool City Council, if you take the case of Birmingham, these are Labour-run councils. Therefore, when it comes to the local elections in May, something that many predict, if you look at the polls, it will be another disastrous year for the Conservatives, but he will probably say, you've got to really think hard about who's running your local authority, who is running your local councils, make sure that they are the best able to do so, and so they don't find themselves in the situation of the examples that I've just given. But I think what he will also say is that, look, every penny counts, every pound has to matter. And so it's not necessarily about spending money on consultants and diversity targets. Of course, you want everybody to rise to the top and have the opportunity to do so. But you don't need to employ, you know, thousands of consultants on thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money to achieve the results. Just get on and get the right people in and let them do the job. So I think he will be very keen to stress tomorrow that whether it's central government, whether it's local government, that yes, we're going to continue to fund public services. Tax cuts will also be part of that, but they won't be as dramatic as I think many believe, because there's still a lot of debt to pay off from COVID and the struggles that have obviously been endured as part of that. So he will say, stick to the plan, but public services, whether it's in local or central government, have to be delivered in a way in which is efficient. And that might mean that some councils have to tighten their belt. It might mean that some councils shouldn't be asking for as much money as they do. But we know that they do a great job, local authorities. They are responsible for healthcare, education, social care, the roads, potholes, all things that residents care about. So I think every council should take from tomorrow that they'll be on they'll face more scrutiny from the Treasury and certainly from the Department for Levelling Up in Communities, where Michael Gove, my former boss, is the Secretary of State. But every pound and every penny counts.
And Aubrey, final word from you. Do you think Jeremy Hunt has any money down the back of the sofa, any rabbits in the hat, anything that he's going to beguile and delight us with tomorrow? Any fabulous surprises? I'm just wishing and hoping and hoping and wishing. Do you reckon there's anything that's going to be, you know, inject a bit of va-va-voom into a pretty bleak situation?
I think it's unlikely that we're going to get too many rabbits out of the hat, partly because this fiscal event is being held so soon after the last one. The last autumn statement was at the end of November 2022, and we're having this one relatively early as well. So the amount of time, if you like, for the Exchequer to have garnered tax receipts and so on and so forth is actually relatively little. So there's quite a small amount of headroom for the Chancellor available. It's likely to be very targeted on the big profile cuts to national insurance, which Number 10 and the Treasury hope will have more cut through than they did in January when the last cuts were announced.
Thank you very much indeed.